Is Daf Yomi is Zevachim Daf Memches. This is the Daf Yomi for Shabbos Kodesh, recording it on Friday, or Shabbos Parashas Lech Lecha. We're going to start on top of 48a. That the Mishnah said that the par and the sai, or the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur, are slaughtered in the northern part. So Gemara wants to know why we're just beginning our discussion of the sacrifices that are being slaughtered in the north with the sin offerings. Why not start with the Ola? Since the fact that there should be a sacrifice in the north is written explicitly about the Ola offering. Nisni Ola Beresha. The Ola should have been discussed first in the Mishnah, not the Chatas. Mara says the answer is Chatas Aidi de Asi Midrasha Chavivale. Since the Chatas is learned out from a drasha, from an exposition, therefore it's more beloved to the author of the Mishnah. Therefore, that's written first. Mara says, but still, then we start with the Par and the Sarah Yom Kippur, which are inner offerings brought inside the sanctuary. Less common. Nisni chatos achitzonos. Why not start with the offerings of the sin offerings that are in the courtyard, the more common ones, and then go to the offerings that are inside the sanctuary? The Gemara says, no. Since the blood of the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur, the blood goes inside. Therefore, we start with that. The Gemara says, where is it written that the Ola offering is done in the north? Where is that written? Because it says it says you shall slaughter the Ola next to the altar in the north. Gemara says, well, Ashkechan ben son, but that verse only refers to a sheep. Ben Bakarmano. And how do we know also a cattle is slaughtered in the north? Gemara says, Amakra, it says V'im minatzon. There's a vav before the sheep. And the vav mosif on alinyan rishon. So the vav is coming to add on to the sheep. V'yomad el yom mitachtan. And we learned about from the verse before, and what's discussed before, the cattle. Gemara says, Hani chamandam or malamdin. That only goes according to the one who says we learn out from that. But from the extra vav in that manner. El amandam or emalam. And according to the ones who say we can't, Michael and Mamer. How would we know that the Ola is in the north? Tanya, because we learned in the Brisa, it says about the carbon asham taloi, ve'im nefesh. And asham taloi is a carbon you bring if you're not sure if you sinned. And so therefore it says ve'im nefesh. So it says l'chayev al safek milos. The previous asham taloi, the previous passage discusses before an asham taloi discusses a me'ilah. And so it's telling us by saying ve'im nefesh to tell us, the Rabbi Akiva, that you're liable, according to Rabbi Akiva, to bring an asham taloi, even if you're not sure if you did a me'ilah. The Chamim, however, say potrin. Chamim say if you're not sure if you did a me'ilah, you're exempt. My love, okay, isn't the argument Mar Savar Lameidin? Rabbi Akiva says we do learn it. Mar Savar Ein Lameidin. And Chachamim say we don't learn it. So according to Chachamim, how do we know whether or not the olas are done in the north by a bakar? So the Gemara says, Amar Papa de Koyamo Maiden. Everybody says, even the Chachamim would say you learn. And what's the reason why the Rabbanan say you don't bring an asham taloi for a meal? Because Nemar Kam mitzvos, it says by a person who does asham taloi, it says the word mitzvos for Nemar b'chatas chelav, and also says by the sin offering, achatas, which is the general sin offering, is called achatas chelav. It says mitzvos. Just like by the regular sin offering, it's only if you do it intentionally, you get kares, and accidentally chatas. Afkan, also the asham taloi, is something shechayav and als dono kares v'ashilo chatas. Something if you did it accidentally, you bring a chatas. But the me'ilah, if you did it accidentally, you bring an asham. So therefore, we know that according to Chachamim, you don't bring an asham taloi. But generally, they would say learn out the vav. Whereas Rabbi Akiva, why? So the Rabbi Akiva, what does he do with this? Gzeir shava of mitzvos. He's to tell us ma'alan bekavua. He learns out this gzeir shava to teach us, just like the chatas is a fixed korban for poor, for rich. Also asham taloi is only going to come for something which is for a fixed sin offering. So Ma'olam Kavua, just like a sin offering is fixed, Avkam Kavua, it's also a fixed offering. Afuke Chatos, to exclude a sin offering, the Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav, and if you're not sure, Tuma of entering into the temple while you're Tamei, the Ol of Yoridu, which is variable, and there you wouldn't bring an Asham Talai. And the Rabbanan say, Ein Gzera Shava Mechsa. No, the Rabbanan say, once you make the Gzera Shava, you apply it across the board. And just like we learn about it for, if we're going to learn about it for one aspect of the offering, we're learning for the whole thing. We're not going to do it partly. Rabbi Kiva Nami Ein Gzera Shava Mechsa. Rabbi Kiva should also say that. So therefore, so what's the nature of the dispute? Rabbi Kiva Savar, the im nefesh ksiv. Rabbi Kiva says, it says in the pasuk, the im nefesh. And that teaches us, vav mosif al inyan rishon. And so that's to tell us, Rabbi Kiva says, that since it says, the im nefesh, that's to teach us, the vav is adding on to the first. Meaning to say, Asham Toa is adding on to the Milas Asham, going back to the previous answer. So the Rabbanan Nami Oksiv Im Nefesh. Rabbanan also have the Im Nefesh. So maybe this is their argument. Tomorrow Sever Hekesh Adif. The Rabbi Kiva holds that the Hekesh, that when there's a Gzera Shav and Hekesh, the Hekesh is more important. Umar Sever Gzera Shava Adif. Whereas the Rabbanan say we follow the Gzera Shava, whereas Rabbi Kiva says follow the Hekesh, and that's why they compare it to the previous passage. Umar says no. Even the rabbis would say a hekesh is more important. The rabbis will say, in our case, don't say that the upper passage of the Me'ilah teaches us about the lower passage, but rather the lower passage of the Asham Toa makes a law from the upper passage to teach us Asham B'Kesef Shkolim. That just like that, to teach us that an Asham you have to pay a minimum of 2 shekel, the minimum value. So don't say don't say the Asham Toa should be more strict than the for sure sin. Just like if you for sure sinned, you bring a chatas worth any amount. So just say also by a doubtful sin, it's worth a danka, which is any amount. Don't say that. When you say an asham toa, it has to be worth 2 shekel, because the Hekesh doesn't contradict the Gzera Shava. So Rabbi Akiva, high Svarminole, how do they know an Asham Toa has to be worth at least 2 shekel? Nafkoim Mivizos Torahs Asham. Torah Tachas L'chol Hashamos. There's one law for all the Hashamos. So Teinach Man the Itzlei Torahs, that works according to the one who says we derive from the Torahs. But Man the Leitzlei Torahs, but the ones who don't derive that from Torahs, how do they know that? They were there from Gomer Be'erkecha, from that Gzera Shava. Gemara says Teinach Hecha Dachsev Be'erkecha, but where it says Be'erkecha, but Asham Shivcha Charufa, the low Ksiv Be'erkecha. By an Asham Shivcha Charufa, where it's not written Be'erkecha, Michael and Meimer. How do we know this idea? Gomer Be'el. We learned it out from Be'el. So they were not from there. So the Gemara says, okay, so we now know how the tzafon is required for the olah. Chatas mino and divide tzafon. How do we know that a chatas requires tzafon? A sin offering. They'll say v'shachatas a chatas b'mkom olah. The slaughter of the sin offering in the place of the olah. Ashkon shlita. Okay, we know that the shlita, the slaughtering of the chatas, is in the north. Kabbalah mino. And how do we know that the receiving of the blood? D'chsev v'akacha kohen midama. So it says he takes from its blood. So It teaches us it also in the place of the slaughtering. The Kabo Atzum we know. And how do we know that the person who receives the butter also has to be in the north? Which means lo yikach. He should himself stand there. Ashkal a mitzvah la'akim. We know it's a mitzvah. I don't know it's essential. There's a different pasuk which states, "You should slaughter it in the place where he slaughters the oah." V'tanya hechan oah nishchata, and where is the oah slaughtered? B'tzafon. Av zeh b'tzafon. So also this is in the tzafon. So the Gemara says, is this the source? Well, look for a number. In the place where the oah is slaughtered, there you should slaughter the chatas. So why was the Nazi's chatas singled out? It's to tell us that if it wasn't slaughtered in the north, it's disqualified. The Gemara says, is that the reason? Maybe just tell us that the Nazi's offering required stuff, but the others don't. Slaughter sin offering in the place of the oah. All the chatos require no. Gemara says, Ashkon Tzayer Nasi. We found the north requirement for a Nasi's chatos, bein a mitzvah, bein a akev, whether it's for a mitzvah or it's essential. Shar chatos nami Ashkon mitzvah akev. And how do we know if you didn't do any of the other chatos in the north, it's disqualified? Because the north requirement is written specifically for a sheep offering and also for a goat offering. So that's how you know it's required, that it's essential. Ella oso amoy. So why does it say the shachat oso? Which one does not require the north? Vibalag v'tanya oso b'tzafon. It's in the north. Vein seir nachsham b'tzafon. But the goat that nachsham brought during the dedication, miluim offering, that was not in the north. V'tanya samach yado al rosh hasayir. Rabba Sar Nachshon was smicha, that the goat of Nachshon requires the leaning over on it. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon Amar Rabba Sir Rabba's Chum was smicha. The goats for idolatry require smicha. Sokatai Techamina Hov is Rabba smicha is Rabba Namletzach. But since it's required for smicha, it's also maybe requires in north. Kamashwan it's not. So Maskefo Rabbana and Hanicho Rabbi Yehuda, it makes sense only according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it requires smicha. So you might think it requires the north as well. But Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Shimon, who says it's coming to include idolatrous animal for smicha, Michael, and Maimer. Why would you need to tell us? And it's not required for the north. Amrle Marzucha Breda. Amrle Marzucha Breda Rav Tavil Ravina or Rabbi Yehuda Minicha. Is this good according to Rabbi Yehuda? Am I this Rabbi? It's Rabbi. Am I the lowest Rabbi? Lowest Rabbi. Is it even good according to Rabbi Yehuda? That which is included is included. You can't add on other things. You don't know anything about the north. It's talking about smicha. If there was no pasuk limiting it, I would have said it that it is supposed to be in the north from a comparison. And smicha itself, you could have learned that from a comparison. From one-time laws of sacrifice, we can't learn out for all generations. We can't learn out the law of this from the special Nachshon Chatos for future generations. So Ella, so what does it mean? Also b'tzafon, vein shochet b'tzafon. It's teaching us the Chatos in the north, but the shochet himself does not need to be in the north. Shochet midrabi Achya nachon. The Gemara says no, we reject that. The shochet is learned out from Rabbi Achya. Rabbi Achya, remember Shachan was so al Yeracham as Beyach. Tzafona, Matam Omer. Why does it say on the side of the altar to the north? Because you can't stand in the outside of the north and receive the blood, so you thought you can't stand out of the north and do the slaughtering. So we say no, that's not the case. Also b'safon, ve'im ben open safon. But saying that maybe it means that offering is in the north, but the malika, the slaughtering of a bird, doesn't have to be in the in the north. Tanya Yochli ben Opton Safon. I might think a bird requires the north. Vidinu ma ben son shel kavod kohen kavod Safon. Just like a sheep, which doesn't have to be a kohen, it has to be in the north. Ben Ov shekavod kohen eno din shekavod Safon. A bird which requires a kohen for sure to require the north. Tamomer oso. Mala ben son shekin kavod kli. The Gemara says, yeah, but a bird, you wouldn't make such a comparison because the bird requires a utensil. Meaning to say, a sheep requires a utensil, but a bird doesn't. So how would you think that a sheep, you wouldn't be able to make such a kal chomer? Also b'safon vein pesach b'safon. So the chat is in the north, but not the pesach. Then there wasn't Yaakov or Yochel ye pesach tom b'safon. I might think the pesach requires the north. The dinu ma'ol shekain lo kavalo is ma'ol shlitaso. Kavod Safon and Ola, which is no time, has to be in the north. Pesach Kavod is not shlitaso. And Elodinshi Kavod Safon. For sure, a Pesach should be in the north. But the Gemara says, what kind of Kal Chomer is that? Ma'al Ola Shkein Kalil. The Ola is totally consumed. And we're not from the Chatas. Because Chatas is not entirely burned. Ma'al Chatas Shkein Mekaperet Achayv Krisis. But a Chatas shaves a torment. So Me'asham, Ma'al Hashem Shkein Kochi Kochim. Don't worry, not from Hashem to Pesach. Hashem is Kochi Kochim. Kum Namish Shkein Kochi Kochim. And in fact, all of these offerings are Kochi Kochim and a Pesach is not. The Gemara says, "Om kedam rina maker." Also, b'tofim ein shachar b'tofim. Go back to the opinion. It's in the north, but not to slaughter. The kachalach mid the Rabbi Achia. Didn't we learn that out from Rabbi Achia, who said, "Oh, so b'tofim ein shachar b'tofim." Rabbi Mute shachar b'tofim. That was not to exclude him from the north. That ain't shachar. It's to tell us he doesn't have to stand in the north, but the Mekabel B'tzafon has to stand in the north. Mekabel L'Lakal Kachach? Nafka. Didn't Mekabel learn that from L'Lakal Kachach? Gemara says, no, that we reject. L'Lakal Kachach, oh, mashmai, that we don't derive. The Gemara says, Ashkechan Shlita Ba'ola Mitzvah. Kabbalah Nami Mitzvah Ashkechan. Shlita V'Kabbalah Akaminalan. So we find that Shlita by an Ola ideally should be done in the north and receiving in the blood, but how do we know it's a requirement? We're not from Kavchomer. It's just like the Chatas, which comes only to the north, only because of the Ola, it requires the north. And if you don't do it, it's disqualified. Ola Shabbat Chatas Mikocha Eino Din Shemakev. It's for sure by the Ola it should be required. It says, but Mal Chatas came a Chaperes Achayv Krisus. You can't learn from that. The Chatas requires is atonement. We ever find that a secondary thing is more stringent than the primary? We never find that. Mara says, yes, we do. What about Meiser? That's redeemed. You will because of Meiser. Ain't no nifta. But if you buy food with the Meiser Shanim, it's not redeemed. It's not because of Meiser. Shenitma Yipada, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yikaver. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it can't be redeemed. It's not that the tafel is stronger, it's just that it's not strong enough to allow take redemption. Meaning to say it's the opposite. That shows it's weaker from the fact that it can't be redeemed. Okay, we'll stop here. Baruch Hashem. We'll review this obviously and do it in much more depth on Shabbos Kodesh. Shkoyach.